Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Finovate podcast. Joining me today, we have Steve Dow, the co-founder and CEO of Monit, one of the companies who won Best of Show at FinovateFall Digital back in September. Steve, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, great to be with you. We had a blast at Finovate, and it's great to reconnect.
Excellent. So for anybody who hasn't seen the video yet, which, by the way, you can find it at finovate.com/videos, all of the demo videos from that event. And I would definitely encourage you checking out Monit's video. But for people who haven't seen that video of your demo yet, Steve, can you start with just a quick intro to Monit?
Sure. Yeah, Monit is you think of it as an intelligence layer that attaches to a small business owner's accounting platform and shows them what they need to see about their business now and down the road. Really paints the picture for them about their financial future, allows them to plan and to sort of see what's most important and really help them manage their business. We're deploying Monit through banks. So banks are the ones providing it to their small business customers. And the reason that banks are doing that is because in the app itself and then through some other sort of vehicles, we're able to tie the relationship to the customer and the banker much more closely.
Excellent. So I know in talking with you, and we were able to get to know each other a little bit in the prep for FinovateFall as well, it's become clear that helping small businesses is something that you care a lot about. Can you talk about where that passion comes from?
Sure. So I have entrepreneurs really on both sides of my family. I started my own sort of first business when I was 15 years old or so. So I've always been really attracted to small businesses. Sort of fast forward, I was in a career in banking. There had always been this sort of axiom floating around that small businesses were underserved, and that sort of bugged me a little bit. And I really wanted to understand that. So I took a role in our small business group and really sort of got a front row seat into what those issues were with small businesses and how they interface with their banks, and then also how their banks struggle to serve small businesses. And then, a year or so ago, my co-founder called me up and said he was working on this really interesting project to help small businesses and the banks that serve them. And I immediately fell in love. So I've always been passionate about small business. Have sort of, it's in my blood, in my family. And now I'm really excited to be sort of in this capacity, trying to help those small businesses, especially at this really tough time.
Yeah, no, definitely a tough time, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But I think it's really interesting to hear about the experience that you've got on both sides, right? You've sort of seen the pain points from the side of the small business, seen the pain points from the side of the banking industry as they look to support those businesses. Has there been anything that you've kind of been able to just lift straight out of a painful moment and say, that's going in? We got to make sure that we're putting this in our platform because I know from personal experience that it's a real pain point.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a few. I think, one, when I was, on the banking side of the fence, and I would talk to our frontline bankers and say, what are some of the issues you have with, making sales or serving your customers? One thing that would come up sort of again and again is when they started a discussion with a customer who needed a loan or a line of credit, getting that initial view into their financials always took a ton of time. So one of the things that we do in Monit, among the many features that we have, is when we're talking to a small business owner saying, hey, look, now might be the right time to talk to your banker, about a loan or a line of credit. We give them what we call sort of the easy button, say, do you want to send your banker your latest financials? And we give them that one button, we send it over because we do have the tie into their accounting system. So it's a very easy thing for us to do. And it makes life easier for that small business owner. They don't have to go around, print out reports, sort of update their financials, all that kind of stuff. And it gets the banker exactly what they need to get that credit conversation going, to really cut down on the time to, sort of get the product that customer needs.
Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult it is as you're trying to manage all the other aspects of a business, to keep an eye on the financial side of it. And from a banker standpoint, of course, there's going to be frustration. How can you not have these documents? And from the small business owner, they're like, what are you talking about? I never saw those documents. And so it's so easy to imagine this pitfall emerging between these two groups and just so much stuff getting lost in there. But now, we talked about it briefly, but let's kind of dive in. Obviously coronavirus has had a massive impact on small businesses. It's it's something which is being felt in all aspects of the economy. And I think most people would say that they see the value of small businesses in our overall social fabric as well. It's not just an economic impact. But in this kind of massive headwind, how much of a difference can a tool like Monit really make?
Yeah, I mean, we think if nothing else, the sort of current state of the economy has only really increased the relevancy and urgency for business owners to have something like Monit. When things are good, cash flow sort of takes care of itself. The financials are okay. You don't have to sort of watch them day to day. But now where sort of every last dollar matters. There's a lot of uncertainty, both for your business, your suppliers, your customers. Being able to be on top of that, being able to do some scenario planning, see where things are going, is extremely important for any small business owner. And we do it in a very easy, sort of intuitive way, right? No business owner, even in sort of good times, wants to, sort of dig into their accounting or dig into spreadsheets. We have a very user-friendly interface to take care of a lot of that. So that's really one. And then we also added a PPP optimizer. We knew that there were over 5 million customers out there who had PPP loans, and there's all these sort of crazy rules around forgiveness. So we wanted to give them something so they could really understand where they stood and where they needed to go. So I think, again, it's a really tough time that these small businesses are in. We wanted to give them those tools to help navigate and really focus on their business.
I think one of the things that's been really interesting for me as I've been thinking about this episode and what Monit really does, there's a lot of people who look at small businesses and they say, okay, we know that the majority of small businesses that fail do so because of cash flow reasons, not because there's a fundamental problem in their business model. And so sometimes, as an outsider in this space, I tend to think of these types of tools as being relevant. The difference maker for those companies who are kind of on the edge, the companies who you think might make it, might not. But now I think, listening to you talk about it, I realize that the companies who've been historically very successful, the ones who haven't been struggling, who haven't been close to the edge for a while, are potentially, in a really good position to engage with this kind of technology as well, because those are the ones for whom it's been very easy to ignore the financial aspect or not really engage with it at that level. You can just sort of trust, I know I've got customers coming into the shop. I know I'm paying the suppliers on time. There's always money in the bank account. I don't need to look at it that closely. And now all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where, wait a minute, maybe I really do need to look at it a lot more closely than I have been. And, I think this is where there's the real danger right now in our economy, is that there's some of these businesses which are successful, sound businesses, all of a sudden find themselves up against this wall and don't really have any experience with how they can deal with it. So that's, I think, a really interesting piece, which I hadn't really considered until we started having this conversation. So my next question, when you look at a tool like Monit, there are obviously some visual similarities with PFM style elements, budgeting apps for individuals. And we've certainly seen a lot of those tools at Finovate, and they work really well, but individuals haven't really taken them up as much as you might expect. And I think this is one of the things that's really surprised the fintech industry. Why is the small business market more likely to actually adopt this kind of technology?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's two big differences. So I'm pretty familiar with some of the consumer PFM stuff. Actually, invested in some in a prior life. Number one difference is the data. So when you're working with a consumer, you're aggregating their various accounts. Categorization becomes a big issue. Understanding transfers between accounts and sort of how those flow and impact, the history, and then also what a forecast might look like, all becomes very challenging. So it's actually, quite hard. And there's a pretty big data cleanup challenge dealing with traditional PFM. And then the other thing with traditional PFM is, quite frankly, consumers and just their psychology is they want to abstract away from what they see as fast as they can, right? They don't want to see that they're overspending in a certain category, or that they'll never reach the goals that they want to in a certain amount of time. So that's why, PFM has suffered from pretty low usage and pretty low sort of traction. When you're dealing with business owners, first of all, the data is quite clean. As I said, we attach to various accounting software. So whether it's QuickBooks, Xero, what have you, we're getting that data. It's very well categorized. The data ontology is quite clear. So it's quite easy for us to work with that data. And then number two, business owners are quite rational. This is their livelihood. In many cases, they've invested their life savings. They've mortgaged their house one or two times. And so they are very inclined to make really good decisions, but they're not accounting people. They're not finance people. And what they need is someone to sort of guide them and give them those recommendations on how to run their business better, which is what Monit does, and helps show them what the future looks like. We often discuss Monit as a financial tool for small business owners, but it's really an emotional tool as well. It helps them feel confident and comfortable about where their business is going.
Yeah, and I think that emotional piece is obviously a really huge difference. I think everybody who has played with a PFM tool has had this moment where you can see the sum total of every bad decision you've made laid out in like black and white data format. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I went to Subway that many times in 1 month. I really need to broaden my horizons, or whatever the case may be. So now coming to the other side of this, because obviously the small businesses are in a position I think to really benefit here. But let's pretend hypothetically that there was a bank out there that didn't care at all about the social fabric of society, that didn't care about the economy, and only cared about their own profitability. I know it's difficult to imagine, but pretend for a moment that it's true. If there was a bank like that, why would they be interested in engaging with Monit? Why should they care about making their small business customers a priority right now?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. Number one, a lot of the sort of mega national banks, not to name any names, have started to come out with tools very similar to Monit's. So it's becoming a competitive, sort of table stake to have something like this. And those big banks are investing quite heavily in acquiring small business customers. So that's number one. Number two is small business customers have historically been underserved by all banks, and I think that's sort of a truism at this point. And they can be quite profitable customers, but one of the reasons that they're not is they tend to sort of have relationships across a number of banks. And so one of the things that we do is within the experience for the user, but also for the bank and the banker, we create timely and contextually relevant occasions for those relationships to be built and deepened. So in the app, if we're projecting a cash flow shortage, we'll say to the user, talk to your banker about a line of credit. And then we facilitate that conversation in the same way that we can show really interesting data that banks have never seen before about their customer base that informs some really interesting things around product, marketing, and even risk management. Remember, we have access to those, to their accounting data. So there's quite a bit that we can, sort of share with the bank. Now, there's privacy policies. We can't share specific data, but even aggregated and anonymized data. This is data that banks have never seen before. And so we can really drive profitability for those small business customers.
Excellent. No, I think it all makes sense, and it's easy to see why you were able to strike a chord with the audience that we had there at FinovateFall Digital, and we're able to walk away with a very well-deserved Best of Show trophy. So, Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Hey, Greg, thank you. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you at Finovate West.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll see you at Finovate West in a little bit. And again, for anybody interested in checking out their Best of Show winning demo, you can find that at finovate.com/videos. Search for Monit, MONIT. Memorable, perhaps, for the pun at the end of your demo, I'm on it. Thanks, Steve.
Very good. Thanks, Greg.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.